Same page. Perfect. All right.
Everybody, please submit whatever you have.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm lecturing again. Okay. Hello. I just wanted to do a quick review. I know that we don't always do reviews and warm-ups on professional skills days, but I just kind of want to talk for a quick second about the client-server model and HTTP, just because I think it's something that we can all go over, right? I was telling somebody last night, I don't really care that much that you guys come out of this program with like perfectly memorized syntax around how to use all of these tools. Why? Because that's impossible. I was looking up Express stuff to prep for this lecture this morning, right? Like, it's totally fine to do that. The thing that I really want you to take out of this program at the end of it is a strong conceptual understanding about what's required in web development and how it works, right? And a big part of that is the client-server model. So I sort of wanted to do a quick review of that, right? Now, we've gotten into Express at this point. We're pretty deep into Express, right? And a lot of you, hopefully, a lot of you have probably been a little bit skeptical about it, right? Why are we making these apps to serve HTML, right? When what we did in the past worked just fine, where we made HTML files and then said open them, and they opened in the Chrome browser, and they worked just fine. Why reinvent the wheel here, right? Why write all of this extra JavaScript just to do something that we could already do straight from the command line just with raw HTML, right? I realize that sounded like a rhetorical question, but it was an actual question that I wanted to pose to you guys. What's the reason? What's the reason why we use Express or Node's HTTP module or make servers or run servers or anything, right? Why? Easier? I mean, I think that just making an HTML file and saying open is easier, right? Yeah. to have it out there in the world, I mean, you're right, but I don't know how yet. Yes?
I remember reading something about separation of task processes and like they about delivering like verification, like certain like the front end do certain things better than the back end, so we can do that and have one thing do that and the other specializing on us.
Separation of tasks and concerns, yes. We don't want everything to be delegated to the client. That would be inefficient and pretty bad, right? So yes, that's one part of it. Yeah.
When you add the open paragraph, just one HTML, open it, and it was related HTML files, you could see that with the JS on the new one. That's a continuously refresh it as you make changes, and it keeps itself running.
Okay.
You have access when you set file, it sets out like 10 different HTMLs and just change the address and full stop.
Yeah, sure. So the usage of other NPM modules like NodeMon, I think is what you're talking about, to be able to refresh an app as you're developing it is definitely a big reason why Express is nice, and why server-based, kind of JavaScript-based web development is pretty nice, right? Node is nice. NPM is nice. It's just good, right? However, right, still doesn't quite hit on exactly why we use Express or why we want to use Express, right? And I think the reason for that is because we've only done local development so far, right? We've developed apps locally, we've run apps locally on our machine, right? So our apps are available to us basically whenever we need them. And our HTML is available to us basically whenever we need it, right? We can just like open up our HTML file or start up our Express server, and either way, we can see the shit that we made, right? Let's talk about the internet though, right? The internet theoretically can serve information to you 24/7, right? Whenever you need it, right? You're going to be able to get it, unless Wikipedia is down or whatever, right? And the reason for that is because of servers, right? The reason for that is because of servers, explicitly. We really would not want to have to send people an HTML file for them to be able to see our information, right? We also really wouldn't want to have to like serve stuff from our own computer, right? Theoretically. So what we're going to be learning at the end of the day, right, is how to get a remote server. This is like way in the future. This is deployment, right? But we're going to learn how to get a remote server, and then we're going to learn how to actually serve information through that server to a user, right? And the advantage of that is that no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, right? It's not just like one task to open a web page, right? My server is always running, and that stuff is always available, right? So that's why, ultimately, that's why Express is important, right? Because instead of just doing a command in your command line to open up a web page, what you're doing is you're making a command in the command line, and then your command line is just busy. It's just like, hold the phone. You can't write anything else in it. I mean, you can write other things in it, but it doesn't do anything, right? And that is good, right? That indicates to us that our server is just ambiently making information available to the user. And when we put that shit on the internet, that's what a website is, right? Yeah.
So once Express connects to a server that we make or have access to, that same port listening to the server address being idle, that will show the servers online.
So deployment on a server is a little bit like deployment on a remote server is a little bit different. What we do is we access that server by like a given name, frequently like a URL that we give to it, right? And then we actually like upload our app to the server. We like upload our entire Express app to the server, and then that server spins up and starts running on that URL. And usually that URL is like, if we're serving it on Heroku, for example, that URL is like wandering-reef at .herokuapp.com, right? It's like just like an auto-generated name that they made. But then we give it a URL alias, right? So like readgames.com, for example, is an alias for an app that's like some kind of garbage, gross URL, right? So that's kind of how we're going to serve stuff eventually. But my point is, right, like I'm a big proponent of like why-based learning, right? And if we're talking about the why of why we're doing this, the reason is because you're going to be able to consistently serve information for users at any time, anywhere on your websites. And that's like hugely important, right? Because like as proud as you are of your like Airbnb clone or whatever, right? And as dope as you feel when you like are able to like make a booking in your Airbnb app, right? If somebody can't do that consistently all the time, and they're a third-party user who has no reason to give a shit about you, they will get upset and they will stop using you, right? You've had that experience with technology, right? Like when technology does not work magically for you, you're just like, fuck this, right? So that's what servers give us. They give us the ability to consistently serve data and information to our users, right? To our clients, if you will. It's important to note, right, that many servers also serve information that the client needs to run, right? So like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? Those like 3 files that we put together to make our rudimentary front ends on the DOM and stuff like that, right? Those files are sent to the client by the server right when we access the site, right? And that becomes the client. And then the server is our Express stuff, right? So our little JavaScript file in the client might go like, hey, like fetch this from the server, right? And the server knows to do that. Yeah, for sure. So the client, right, is theoretically a computer, right? Like my computer is a client when it queries URLs for information, right? However, our version of the client is also our front-end application that we're sending to a web browser, right? I'm in draw.io right now, right? And draw.io is saving all of the stuff that I'm writing to Google Drive. Google Drive is the server. Google Drive is the thing that's saving the information. But all of this functionality, like all of this stuff that's letting me like make rectangles and whatnot, right? All of this stuff is just running in my browser. It's connecting to the internet selectively in order to save the information, right? When I change stuff, it's connecting to the server and going like, hey, read made a change. But the first time that I accessed draw.io, what it did was it sent me all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript I need to run this in my browser. And so this front-end application becomes my client. Why is that? Is a question that you might be asking right now, right? Well, the reason why that is because clients and servers interact via HTTP. What does HTTP stand for? Oh, I love that gentle mumbling. It's like somebody making sense, but like in the back of a cave, and you're like at the front of it, and it's like echoing to you, and you're like, that almost makes sense. Yeah, hypertext transfer protocol. Hypertext transfer protocol, HTTP, is something that people made up for you to use, right? It's not some magic thing. It can't do everything. People are fallible. People write shit, right? If we were rewriting HTTP today, we might have made HTTP be able to do more than one thing at a time. But HTTP can't do more than one thing at a time. HTTP receives one request, a GET request, a PUT request, a POST request, a DELETE request, right? And it sends one response, right? So why does that explain this client-server kind of thing that's going on, right? Well, because HTTP can only do one thing at a time, what it does, when the client first accesses the site, it has to load all of this stuff with like one request, right? So it says, okay, send me the entire front end here, because if I'm constantly asking you for shit, then this is gonna go badly, right? So draw.io goes like, all right, I'm gonna send you this big JavaScript file, this big HTML file, this big CSS file. And then we go, thank you. And then whenever we update a new thing, we say, all right, post request to Google Drive. Google Drive goes, cool, got it. Yeah.
That GET request, that GET request.
Yep.
Is it 3 different GET requests for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, or is it one GET request?
Great question. Is it 3 different GET requests, or is it one request for all 3? I believe it is one request for all 3. Still sent in one response, though, right? So I think that that's the kind of fundamental concept that I want to describe to you, right? Ooh, I unplugged this. Oh no, this is bad. Right here, bad. Anyway, so I think that that's the concept that I really want to get across to you, right? Is that there's only one request and there's only one response at a time. So when we are thinking about, for example, middleware, right? Middleware includes like requests and response and next in the arguments of a middleware function, right? That request and response is exactly the same as the request and response we get from the next function, and the next function, and the next function, right? It's the same request, and it's the same planned response. Why? Because HTTP can't do more than one thing at once. Yes?
So you're saying how Express works with the next and the chain?
Uh-huh.
It's the same logic for HTTP, like GET response?
Yes. Yes, Express very explicitly works according to the conventions of HTTP. The only way that Express can deliver information to you is via HTTP. Express is specifically set up to receive HTTP requests and send responses. One at a time, baby. Yes?
I'm still kind of confused about what the middleware is doing to the GET request data. Like, is it is the function working on the data you're getting from the client, or is it working on the data that's in the database?
Great question. So the question is middleware working on the data that you send from the request, or is it working on something in the database, or what is exactly middleware doing, right? The answer is that middleware describes an order in which something happens more than it describes a specific behavior. Different types of middleware do all sorts of different things. The one thing that makes them middleware is that they they are things that happen in between the request being like made and the response being sent, right? So you might have a middleware, for example, right? If somebody sent a request with some really ugly data on it, you might have a piece of middleware that cleans up that data before you put it into your server, right? And then your next piece of middleware before you put it into your database, right? And then your next piece of middleware might put it into your database. And then it sends you to the next function, which sends a response that goes like, cool, you're good, right? So middleware is not explicitly, like a lot of things that we study here, right? Middleware is not explicitly necessary to creating a full-featured Express app. It's just a way for you to separate out your concerns and have a high degree of control over the order in which stuff happens to a request, right? So I could have, like one common piece of middleware is like a logger, where requests get console logged, right? Obviously, that doesn't do anything to the database. It just logs shit to the console, right? But other pieces of middleware might ping the database for something, right? For example, user authentication, right? A really, really common pattern, if we have a protected route, right? Like app.get /private, right? A really, really common middleware pattern is we might have a middleware function called login required. And then we'll do like send response, right? What this does is it sends it to our login required function, which checks to see if the user is logged in and able to access that information, right? And then if the user is, then it will call next and send it to this thing which actually sends the information to them, right? So login required in this case is a piece of middleware that's acting as a gatekeeper to this next function that sends private information. Again, middleware isn't about what these... Middleware doesn't describe what the functions do. It describes the order in which the functions happen. In other words, middleware functions happen in the middle of a request. There were other questions. There were other hands. Hands? Yes.
So this has to do with the res.json.
Mm-hmm.
For the homework, is it better practice to have res.json inside this function or inside the function created in different modules?
Is it a better practice to have res.json inside of this root level function or inside of the functions in different modules? The answer to that question is it depends, and I hate answering questions like that. But it really does depend, right? Like if I'm making like a full featured app, right? And I just want like a really, really catch-all error handler, right? Then I might do app.get. This, by the way, is the wildcard. So any requests being sent will go here, right? So we usually put this on the bottom to handle all requests that don't fit the format of what we're doing. Usually this is the error handler route, right? So I might do this, and then in here, I might send a response.json, right? But frequently with other routes, like users or other stuff that I'm accounting for, I might delegate that to different modules. Yeah. You're not 100% clear on the difference between res.send and res.json. That's great. So res.send sends stuff in text form, right? And you can parse it after the fact or whatever, but it sends stuff back in text form, right? Res.json expects an object and sends it back as a JSON object, right? You may still have to parse it on the other end, but I like pretty much when I'm making servers, right? I'm almost exclusively using res.json because, right? We're not going to, at the end of all of this, right? We're not going to have our servers serving HTML pages to be rendered or just like text or anything like that. What we're going to have our servers serve is data that it gets from a database. So always that data comes out in JSON format. Yeah. Could that data include functions? If you are sending functions from the back end to the front end, then that's an indication to me that the organization of your code is a little bit screwed up. Yeah.
I'm aware that sometimes, I don't know why, but like, you get the same structure, not on JSON level, sorry. I do res.send, still it's the same way. If I were to use object format, and that's not saying.
Right, it parses to look the same way when you use res.send. I mean, I like frequently, right? Like the extension that we use will format it if it looks JSON-y, right? So like, I think that that's more a function of the extension that we're using than that there is no difference between res.send and res.json. Yeah.
What's the extension?
JSON viewer or something. JSON viewer. Yes. Yes.
Example for sending function.
Can we have an example for sending a function? My answer to that is no, because I don't want you guys sending functions from the server to the client. I think that like if you want your client to have access to a function, then my expert recommendation, oh my goodness, is to just write that function in the client. Yeah.
So is that the same as export modules? Is that like require JS file, require JS path?
So your front end and your back end are going to be two entirely different apps. So sort of, I mean, you could put it in a module on your front end and send it, you know, like that's fine. But you could also just write it right in the content of your module. I mean, of your client. My point is, right, if we are, if you're putting functions that are usable by the client in your backend, then my question is, what are you using them for in the backend, and why aren't you just putting them in the client? All right. Let's talk about routing. The most exciting topic possible. routing. It's just an exciting word, right? It's like sick. Anyway, I've made a little app here. I've got so much stuff. Don't pay attention to my ROM of Castlevania. All right. I have an alias for npm start, so that's why I just typed in ns. So we've got this guy here. It's running on localhost 5000, right? And it gives us the message, sick work, right? And if I refresh, it'll give me that same message again, right? And it's all good. Oh, console log. That's why it wasn't doing that. That's silly. Now it'll log that. Yeah, all right. Now we're real developers. So it's very simple, right? It just sends a JSON with like a message key and it says sick work, right? Let's talk about what we can do better here. Or rather, I just want to kind of like work with you to like start to clone an app that's similar to this, right? So these are the notes for this lesson today, right? And I think the usefulness of nested routing, just like the usefulness of modules, isn't really apparent until you get into really big, complicated apps, right? I mean, like product system, user system, order system, review system, right? And we have like this is like an Amazon-like, right? So products is like obvious. You see that on Amazon all the time. It's just products. That's what you see on the front page, right? When you start up Amazon, right? The Echo Dot is an example of a product. Users, right? Users are also a really a fairly obvious feature of Amazon, right? Users store like payment information and like shipping information and your order history, right? Stuff like that. Order system, right? So orders are a like log of all the orders that a user has made, right? This used to be a really important feature for like fulfillment and customer satisfaction. Now it's a really important feature for advertising. Right, and reviews, right? So products might have reviews on them, which are also important for the kind of like Amazon experience, right? So in order to do that, we've got all sorts of different routes here, right? We've got product routes to get us a specific page of products, or to give us a specific product based on its ID, right? We've got a system of users to get a list of all users. That's probably not accessible to the public, right? Because that would be kind of weird. We have the ability to get a user by their ID, and we have the ability to register a new user, right? And then we have orders, right? We have orders for a specific user. And then we have reviews. So you can get reviews or you could post a review for a specific product, right? So here's a question. How are we gonna fucking put all this in our app.js file, right? I mean, we could comment the ever-loving crap out of it. We could put like get, and have like all anonymous callback functions on those GET requests, right? We could send a very specific response for each of them. We could have post, right? My point is like at some point our our project is going to be like huge, right? It's going to be huge. Why? Because we're explicitly writing out all of our routes inside one file, right? Even if we're shopping out our functionality, right, to 2 different modules, we're still containing all of our routing inside one file, right? This is suboptimal, right? Because how many routes does the real Amazon.com have?
Everything, all its products.
A fucking buttload. It has a lot. Even if you're like not really like accounting for all of the like queries parameters and all of the wildcards and stuff like that, it's still a lot. Yes.
So in case of Amazon, would different users actually count as
Different users would not count as different routes, right? Because you would have a wildcard for their user ID. Right? So it's not like you're making a different route for every single new user you're making, because that would be ridiculous and totally unmaintainable. But still, even if you are accounting for wildcards, there's a shitload of routes on Amazon. Yeah.
So when you mentioned earlier, you showed like is that with the dot user or ID? Is that also another wildcard?
Sure. Yeah. So like the like ultimate wildcard for routes is just that asterisk, right? I like to call that asterisk asterisk. It's a really good French comic. I like to call that asterisk a catch-all route. I don't think that that's like a term that's used a lot, but I like to call it that because it explains what that route is for, which is you guys probably noticed this, right? If you make a request and you haven't accounted for a response inside of your app, right? Then your page just hangs, right? Like the thing just loads forever, right? So to have like an asterisk route on the bottom is just to say like, hey, like if we don't get it, we still don't want the page to hang forever. We want to send some kind of response, even if that response is 404 not found. Right? So that's the asterisk. But I would reserve the word wildcard. Actually, if I used wildcard in the past, I apologize. I would reserve the word wildcard for this kind of routing structure. Okay, so Amazon has a buttload of routes, right? We don't want to put all those routes in one file. That would be dumb. However, if our app is running and running all of its requests through this file, right? We need some way for this file to export all of its routing or like much of its routing to other files, right? And you know what might be like a sick way for us to do that? Just based on base routes, right? What if instead of all of these like crazy different routes in one, what if instead of having all these different crazy routes in one folder, instead we had /products, /users, /orders, and /reviews. And then we sent each of those to another file, and those are like, hey, like, is there anything else after this URL? Okay, well then we'll handle that, right? So what I'm kind of suggesting, right, is that we want our app to route our requests one / at a time. Products, users, orders, reviews. So users is going to be sent to a user routing manager that's got all of the rest of these routes accounted for.
I mean, if you're just dividing and making it more organized, I guess, but it's not actually different. That's what I'm not.
Right, it's not actually different. We're just dividing it up and making it more organized. But again, if we're Amazon.com, then if we don't do this, our app.js file will be 20,000 lines. Right? Completely inaccessible, impenetrable, unrefactorable, garbage spaghetti code. Right? Just gross. So while we're doing this on a small scale right now, you'll notice that even when you get into Capstone, right? Even when you're making like a relatively small scale complete application, you're going to be very sad unless you do this. Yeah.
Routing user manager, is that something, is that just that term is just like a keyword to have, guest files, organize it?
Yeah, so the user manager, I'll like actually write this stuff out so that you can see the format of what I'm talking about. But yeah, it like has, it's another JS file, right? So here's what I'm gonna do, right? I'm just gonna work on this app. I'm gonna create a basic routing structure for this app loosely based on what this offers me, right? And I'm going to kind of talk you through the architecture of what I'm setting up here. Cool? All right. So first of all, I'm just going to make a catch-all route to serve a 404 if the route's messed up, right? Because I'm going to be testing routes. If I get it wrong, if the route isn't accounted for, I just want it to go to a 404. Please, God, I don't want it running forever, right? App.get star, in quotation, star, then rec, res.json, message, error. And I'll even throw a little extra on there and say res.status report. You do not need the slash with an asterisk, no. Yep.
Or, so the client end, right? Client is the front end.
The client is the front end.
The front end receives JSON to do stuff with it. That's the thing.
Yes. The front end receives JSON to do stuff with. Exactly.
Have we received JSON before we started this unit?
Have we received JSON before we started this unit?
I can't remember, like,
Yes. The Dog API. The Studio Ghibli API. All of those things are servers that are serving JSON, and then we processed them in our front end, HTML, JS, CSS, right, to make a list of Ghibli films or whatever, right? We parsed that JSON and then presented it to our users in a way that hopefully was useful to them. No, that's dope. I love, all right. How these curly braces are nested? Yeah, so this is connected to this. This is the whole callback function here, right? Like this is the second argument of this function, right? And then res.json, this is the JSON that I'm sending. So there's only 2 layers of curly braces. Okay. So app.get, yes. Oh, yes.
I forgot what JSON.
Yeah, so JSON is short for JavaScript Object Notation. And what JSON means is that it is text, plain text, written in a JSON, like written in a JavaScript object-y format that we can then parse using JavaScript into objects that we can use, right? So what JSON basically means is like, hey, we're structuring this text data in the format of a JavaScript object. So when you get it on the client, if you're using JavaScript, you can just convert it into something usable immediately. Yeah.
Sorry, so I was just last week the front end is also served by our backend. Now, well, yeah.
The first time that we make a request to the backend, if we have a full-fledged app, what our backend does is it sends all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that our front end needs, which becomes our front end. Exactly. Yes. But like, you know, if we're going to Amazon.com for the first time and we don't have the internet, right? It's not going to be able to even send anything that gives us like a structure to the page, right? Everything has to come from a server at some point, right? It's just that what a client is a pre-downloaded set of content from that server. Yes?
So the route would have the JS, CSS, HTML, whatever, that route.
Well, let's get there when we get there. That's not quite how it works, but we're not going to have to just send CSS, HTML raw through HTTP. We'll have React to do that for us. Okay. Let's get into our first route, right? Users. So before I set anything up inside my app.js, right? I always care about architecture first, right? I always care about where my shit's going to be before I set up my shit, right? So I'm gonna make a folder in here, and it's gonna be called routes. And inside routes, I'm going to make a file, and I'm going to call it users.js. Inside routes. This is a file to handle all my user routing. And then I'm going to say, let users equals require /routes/users. Cool so far?
We do not need to put the JS.
If there's no other files, so the question is, don't I have to put the extension JS on the end of users? And the answer to that is, if there's no other files with the name users, then I don't have to put the file extension after it.
App.js is node express routing.
Right. Right. So we have the folder routes, which is one step inside the express routing, and then we have app.js, which is at the root level of express routing. Yeah, so app is at the same level as the folder routes. Okay. So inside our users, well, we want to get stuff, right? We want to get stuff and we want to handle it and we want to do all of our fancy routing things that we do inside app, right? But we don't want to make a whole separate instance of Express, right? We don't want to do what we're doing on line 2, which is to spin up an instance of Express to work for us, right? Then we would be running 2 Express apps, which is not what I want to do, right? Well, luckily we don't have to in order to just handle routing in different folders, right? What we can do is we can say, let Express equals require express, right? And then we can say let router equals express dot router invoked. So Express, the module, makes available to us a class called router that we can create an instance of and then set up routes without having to create a separate instance of Express. Yeah. So require express is the same reference as app.js, right? But it's not creating a separate instance of Express entirely. It's just saying like, hey, I want to be able to use the code that the Express module gives to me. Yeah. Right. Anything that I download from NPM that I put into my node modules folder, in this case Express, I can use across any files in this project. Right. So if I'm using, I don't know, Lodash. Lodash is really cool, by the way. You should look into it. It's a way for you to do shit in JavaScript that you would otherwise have to work really hard to do, like array and object equality and stuff like that. But if I'm downloading Lodash, right, then I can use Lodash anywhere in my project. And I can always just say let Lodash equals require Lodash. Yeah.
When I use that, it gives me a I use constant.
No. There's no difference between const and let other than that you can change what let means. So either you changed what Express is referring to, right? And that might be a problem, or you mess something else up. And that's why it's giving you a 404. Yeah. Yes, this is a key thing.
Okay, so body parser that router, that's what it would be. It will body parser and
So body parser, if you have it up here in app.js, will automatically do its thing before you even get to this user's route, right? Because you put your body parser before any other routing, right? And I think we have this idea, right, that like, or we have the danger, right, of developing an idea that shit doesn't work like we're used to it working like in JavaScript, right? But like, let me assure you that Express is just like any other JavaScript where it reads from the top down. So requests go through from the top down. And if it's going through a line that says body parser is middleware, by the way. The request is being processed by body parser, and it's turning into usable stuff. Yeah. Right. So exactly. So Express has a root kind of function to create a new instance of Express. And it also has a function on it called router to create an instance of an Express router. So so that Express module has both of these things available to it. Yeah.
You keep saying that you're creating a instance of the class of router, and I don't understand that.
Okay. So I keep saying I'm making a new instance of the class router, and people are having a hard time understanding what that means, right? So when I make a class, right? Class dog, right? Whatever. Constructor, etc. Right? I mean, I can put whatever I want to on this thing, right? I have this class definition of dog, but I can't actually use any of the functionalities or attributes that I put on dog until I say let Fido equals new dog.
So how can we have new?
Good question, because router is contained inside of the express object. So we're calling the function we're calling a constructor style function method style, right? So like router is a method of express, right? But it's also a constructor. So we kind of have to pick one or the other, right? We can either do new or we can do dot this function invoked, right? And because it's on the class express, and because it's on our module express, we have to call it like this, right? That's a weird inconsistency that JavaScript is full of. Weird inconsistencies, right? Yes?
So one way to do a new class is that dot router right there you had highlighted at the top. That's one way. And the other way is the new, just saying new dot.
So this is like a relatively basic construction of class, right? When a class exists on another module or something like that, right? We're not going to use the new keyword to create it. We're going to use dot notation to key into the class or key into our module in order to create a new instance of our class. I think, like, again, right? Like, I think that the exact syntax of this stuff is not as useful to us, like as knowing that router is a class on Express, and by creating a new instance of router, we get a bunch of functionality that router makes available to us that's going to be pretty cool. Yeah.
Is there a way to see all the router's options?
There is. I mean, you could just console log router here, but I don't want to do that because right, like as developers, we're going to be working with these modules that have like 1,000 functionalities each, right? And we're going to be using 5 of them from each of them, right? So it's not, I don't want to get too into like every single thing that router can do because honestly, I don't really know every single thing that router can do. Yeah.
On what we're talking about. So this router is a method Express. And we're assessing it this way. Why would we have to, in the other page, app.js, why do we have to invoke Express to actually get the functionalities or all of the methods of Express?
Right. So Express itself is a like class that we have to create an instance of before we can do anything with it, right? What line 1 is saying, right, is it's just saying like, hey, I want all of this code to be available to me. It's just like when we import a function, the function doesn't do anything until we actually invoke it.
Right, but so when we invoke on line number 2, we have all of the methods available to us from Express, right?
Yep.
So why, on our uses.js, we just access it directly without having to invoke Express?
So it's because router and Express are 2 different classes that are going to accomplish 2 different things, right? So we have all the code of Express accessible here as soon as we require Express, which is why we can even do this in the first place, right? And it's also why we can do this. It's what we are doing here fundamentally is we are creating instances of classes in order to accomplish specific tasks, right? If a class requires another class's instance to be able to be created, right, then we would have to do something like invoke Express here, right? But this code is just available to us without having to invoke Express because we've imported all the code in line 1. What we're doing here by creating an instance of Express is allowing ourselves to like listen on a port and stuff like that, which we actually don't need to do inside of our routing. If we did need to listen on a port, then we would create an instance of Express here. Yeah.
So let's say that we do not set the Express as a variable for app, right? So
Okay.
what would the syntax in the case look like? Instead of saying app.listen, would say express parentheses dot.
It would say express parentheses dot listen, but the problem with that, right, is that unless we assign our instance of Express to a variable, we can't actually put new things on it, right? What we're doing every time we say app.get, right, is we are patching new functionalities onto Express that's saying like, hey, Express, right? I know that you know what to do in the abstract when you get a request, but when you get a request with this URL, please do this, right? And Express is saying like, okay, I'm going to incorporate that into my Git functionality. And that is going to be like a part of me now. Right? So this is all object-oriented programming, right? Like to a certain extent. This is creating instances of objects like Express and Express's router in order to do things that we want those, like that we want from those objects. Yeah.
Would that be similar to like when we're doing tic-tac-toe or make boards? So we made the new instance of class, and then we got to methods functions of that class by then being that reference.
Exactly. So like Express, like when we download the module Express, it makes several classes available to us. One is the Express class, and one is the router class, right? And in order to use either Express or router, we have to say like, we have to make a new instance of each of those. And we don't have to do it constructor style because I guess Express does that for us.
Can you talk just a little more on that? So when you download it, you have an Express class and a router class separately. I thought they were part of each other.
They're all part of one package, right? But a package can contain multiple things. So we refer to it using Express because that's how we import all of the code. But that code can contain multiple classes and can have multiple things attached to it, right? It's like, okay, like to make the text to pledge app, I used the Twilio API, right? Which is a package that I downloaded from Twilio. And that package has the ability to send SMS. It has the ability to send email. It has the ability to make phone calls, right? And all of those functionalities are different classes that I would have that I would have had to initiate if I wanted to do any of those specific things. But by downloading Twilio, I downloaded all of those functionalities. Right. Like, the reason why we need NPM, right, is because we don't want to just download a single file that just does one thing, right? We want to very explicitly and easily download like a ton of different files that all do similar things in a group. And that's what a module is.
For referencing what you're saying, so you would do like, if we were to do the same thing with Twilio, not that Twilio does it, but it would be Twilio invoke is something, and then Twilio Twilio.get messages, or send messages, invoke to get the send messages class.
Right, or it would probably be like Twilio.sms invoke, right?
I think it's like you would never really use a Twilio. If you ever need to invoke the package name, I think it's because the names are kind of like the same.
Right. So Express has set itself up such that if you just invoke the basic importing of the class, it knows just to create an instance of the Express server, right? It probably would have been more explicit of them to have you go like this, right? But the way that they set up their package is just so that you can do that. Yeah.
I want to speak that up. Like, the reason why it's like this is because Diamond Express made it this way.
Exactly. It's not like it's not built into JavaScript in any way, right? We learn to use modules the way that people wrote modules, not necessarily the way that we understand that they should work, right? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Open up node modules, right? And it'll take 1,000,000 years to open up because there's a ton of shit in it. and then take a look at the fundamentally not very readable code that is Express. But I'm not super interested in doing that right now because, again, right, Express is going to contain tons and tons and tons of features that we're not going to use. Let's talk about routing. Okay, let's talk about routing real quick. So what router makes available to us is the same functions that app makes available to us. In other words, .get. However, so just like we're doing with app, right, where we're putting all of these routes onto app and then having it listen, right, we're also going to put all of these routes onto our instance of router, and then we're going to export it into app. So we made an instance of router, we put a route onto it to tell it to expect something, and now we're going to export it into our app. Don't I only want the user's route? Wait, guys. I know what you're thinking, right? Hey, you put this on just the slash. But the app is on just the slash too. Oh no. Wait, hold on, indeed. Okay, so let's start in the users area, right? We made a router. We put a get on that router for some kind of root route, right? We had it send a message, whoa, a user. We exported the router, right? Does that track with everyone so far? Okay. We imported our router into app.js. We made a route inside app.js for /users. And we said, okay, whenever anything is sent with the prefix /users in the URL, send it to this router, right? So what route is this router route actually accounting for? /users. Anything that we write in this router has the prefix /users appended to it Why? Because this router is getting called inside this root route. Yeah. Because we use Next, it's not going to keep going. This is not middleware right now, right? We could make an error condition where we would call Next and then it would go just straight to this error page. Next also goes outside of a route and just continues down the chain if we want it to. But let's not get into that for right now. Point is, we created a root route called /users, and then we created a router to handle it that all of these router things expect the prefix /users on the URL. Yeah.
So let's say on JS, yes, I would say just for this case, /content, just for this case. And on users, if I pass the users into that argument, it will inherit /context.
Right, so the prefix would be /context, and it would just serve the same stuff that you would get with /users. But yeah, it would do that.
And then the users.js should always have it as like slash, so it kind of goes to any path assigned to.
Well, this slash, right, is what it really means is /users, right? We can make other routes in there that expect other things appended to it, right? Like we could make a route, and let's just set this up, right? Router.get /:ID rec res
It's users on the other page working kind of like a function call of users, and then this user returns the dollar value.
Repeat that question.
It's just a full screen.
Fine.
So when you see that user there on the second parameter,
On the second parameter,
line 5.
line 5 here.
Right.
Yep.
So that's calling line 3. That's like the other page.
Right. So users here, like what is users here, right? Like what is this actual variable users, right? Not quite. It's the router that we exported from the file, right? We put a bunch of stuff on that router, so it's basically the whole file, right? But it's very specifically the instance of router. Yeah. Yes. We do. Well, we want to put the /:ID before this slash because do we? Yeah, it might not be that inclusive. Point is, we don't want certain routes. We want to put more specific routes before more general routes as a general rule. Unless we want a specific general route to catch a bunch of requests. Yeah.
Last question. Now we have two routes.
Now we have 2 routes, yes.
And for the middleware, we had to set it up and then we got into it. Before we only had one route, you could just put users. Now you have 2 routes. How do you distinguish?
How do you distinguish between them?
Yeah.
Well, when the user puts in /users /this/anything, it will go to this route. And when the user just puts in /users, it'll go to this route. Right. As long as you put in /users, it'll do the thing.
Explain one more time. What's the user after the
This stuff?
yeah, the second user?
This guy?
Yeah.
So this users is, you can see we created like the variable users by importing this route, right? And what we exported from this file, right, is our instance of express router that we created, right? So where's our request going, right? Let's say I make a request for /users, and that's it. Nothing else, right? Okay, so it goes through the top of our app.js. It says like, okay, we're Express, all right? New instance of Express, okay. We've got this users router, okay. App.get/users, whoa! They typed in /users, dope, right? Okay, let's send it to the users router. And then it goes to the top of this users router page, okay. We got router.get/ID. Okay, our route isn't that, right? We just typed in /users, so let's skip that. Router.get/, oh, nice. Our route that our user queried is just /users. Okay, let's send them this response. It's literally going from the top down through this app. It's just taking a detour because we told it to go to this router.
I was thinking, why would that just the slash go first?
Why wouldn't just the / go first? Like, I don't think it actually matters in this scenario, but I want to, you can see that this catch-all is at the bottom, right? It's because if I put that catch-all at the top, every request would just hit that and stop, right? So I want to get it into your minds as a general rule. Maybe you'll find a specific circumstance where you want stuff to be different. But as a general rule, you want to put more specific routes in front of more general routes so that you can give your user as specific a response as possible to their request. Let's run this. Oh, it's already running. So on port 5000, right, now we get a 404 error, right, because I'm not actually accounting for a root route here, so it just gets to this catch-all, right? Let's go to /users. Whoa, a specific user. Why? So we go to /users. We get into the users router, and then we go like, oh, okay, whoa, a user. Yeah. Oh, shit. Oh, my God. It's actually the opposite order. And it still did the same thing? Let me try this. Let me try this. Let's see what's going on here. Just a slash? Like, what do you mean? Like just this? Oh, you mean like a slash here? No. Yeah, let's comment that out. Yeah, it definitely should be whoa user. No, but that what that does is it.
I just did it right now.
Did Express change? I've been setting it up that way forever, and it's always been whatever. Whatever. What I changed, all right, what I changed is app.get/users, and then it wasn't actually hitting this route right here with just the slash, right? So I changed it to /users, and apparently that worked. Maybe Express Generator has like functionality built in to make the routing more specific, right? Like maybe it sets up routing in that way.
So you kind of have the hard code paths.
Yeah, apparently. Like, so now we have to set up /user/ID.
You also organize your HTTP calls.
I'm sorry?
You also organize your HTTP calls.
You mean like this?
So uses.js,
Okay. So you're wondering if I had a post here, like would I put it into a different file? The answer to that is no, because even if I'm making a post request, I'm going to make it through /users, right? Post/users with a new user, right? So instead, I would just do router.post inside here. But I guess you have to hard code, like I bet the Express frameworks that I was using made that routing a little bit easier for me. But I think that so if anything, this makes it more explicit, right? Now you have to hard code the actual explicit route inside of your router. It's exactly how we had it? Yeah. Like this. Right? All right, well, we'll look into this. Yeah, error, and then users, and then it says, well, with specific user. So it's clearly getting into the router for users, and then it's just hitting this, right? /about. Sure. Right. Well, that's because it's hitting this route. So let's do about. Rec, res. I'll post all this code. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah. User/about. No, you see, and then probably if I type in about, no. What the fuck, man? So now you can see we're getting into like. Do you guys remember like in month 1 when you guys came up to me and you were like, "Hey, I have a problem," and I was like, "It's this," right? Now we're getting into territory where I'm gonna take longer to figure it out. So feel good, yeah. Mm-hmm. I changed it to that. Maybe that's doing it. Wait, but like, let's do about now. No, error. What, you want me to do /about here? Or /user/about? Like here?
No. That's another endpoint that says /user and /about. How does it know which one you reported? Router. Which one does it know?
How does it know which one it is? You mean this one? The router's the same thing.
Right, so how does it know which one?
It's all one thing. It's all one router. We're putting different get things on this router, but this router is the same as this router, is the same as this router, is the same as this router. It's all an instance of the same router. Yeah.
Is the slash different than the wildcard slash ID? Anything after that slash?
It is anything after that slash. What's wrong? Ah, different keyword.
A static file, so you can use it anywhere. Static file.
App.use. Not app.use. It's not just for static files anymore. It's now also for instances of router. Well, we got through that together. We debugged app.use instead of app.get here. That was weird. Yeah, let's check. /user/about. Whoa, about a specific user. Thank you so much. /user/3. Whoa, a specific user. /users. Whoa, a user. Oh my God. Hey guys, remember when I come to you and you're like, hey, I've got something wrong, and then I'm like, there's just one specific typo that's like screwing your whole shit up?
Now we know what the difference is.
.get and .use. Now you'll never forget. Exactly. This was all planned. What arguments does .use take? It takes arguments that are very similar to what .get takes. But whereas .get takes a callback function, .use takes an instance of router. Or middleware. Yeah.
Middleware is just function itself.
Yeah, middleware is just function itself. So that's why it wasn't entirely breaking, right? Because it expected it to be middleware, right? So it was like, all right, well, I guess I'll take a look at this, and I guess I'll like use this like catch-all function. Honestly, the mechanics of how JavaScript, this is like a big problem with JavaScript actually, is that it doesn't fail enough. You know what I mean? Like JavaScript really wants to work so badly that you can mess it up and it'll still work, quote unquote, and you'll be like, what the hell is the problem? And then eventually you figure out the problem. But JavaScript won't help you most of the time. Most of the time it's just your friends and teachers.
There is a debugger.
There's debugger, yeah. Point is, you don't have to be explicit, thank goodness. /users, and then if you put in slash, if it's just /users, you'll get one thing, right? If you put in /users/about, you'll get another thing. If you put in /users/anything else, you'll get a third thing. Yeah?
That ID catch-all has to be at the bottom.
That ID catch-all should be at the bottom if you have any other explicit extension routes from user, right? If I put ID above about, here, I'll show you. If I put ID above about, right, because I want, oh no, oh God, did I not copy it correctly? All right. If I put ID above about, and then I did /about, it would not go to the about route. It would go to the ID route.
If you have that above the slash, go to the slash.
Ooh, that's a good question. I think that it would go to the slash because ID expects something after the slash. But these scientists, yep, no, it still works. It's just like normally when you have wildcard stuff, you like frequently want to put it on the bottom, especially if you have explicit stuff before it. so that it doesn't just like step on the explicit stuff's toes. Lunchtime. Sorry. Yeah. So we'll get a little bit more into routing stuff after lunch, but for right now, enjoy.